Hey everyone, we are starting to get some people trickling in. Welcome and happy holidays for anybody that is starting to celebrate. We've got Alan, Christina, Isabella. We've got Monica, Stephanie. Thank you for coming. Susie, Suzanne, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to host today's webinar, which is about the future of work, anticipating cultural shifts in the next decade. We are going to give about 1 or 2 minutes to let people continue to trickle in and see how big this party can get. So we'll hold off on doing formal intros just for now, but we would love to play a little icebreaker with y'all just to get you all comfortable with us. We are going to do a little holiday kind of this or that. Okay, so would you rather give up candy canes or hot chocolate? Please put your opinion in the chat. But Rob, what would you do? Candy canes or hot chocolate? Which one are you giving up?
I was just typing. I would give up candy canes all day. Chocolate is number one. That's it. Easy.
So far, very harsh opinions on candy canes. They're gonna go. All right. And what about you, Lauren?
I totally agree. Hot chocolate all the way. I would keep that in a heartbeat. Candy canes don't really do it for me, so that would be an easy choice to take that out of my holiday diet.
So does that mean that do you guys like mint chocolate? Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of mint chocolate, but I don't know. For me, I always felt like it was like chocolate with a little sprinkle of toothpaste. It was like, sorry if I ruined it for. All right, next one. Would you rather get stuck in an endless loop of hearing jingle bells for a week or have to dress up every day as Santa for a whole month? Tough one. I could do dressing up as Santa every day for a month. I don't know. I feel like that's gonna be the one that I'm going with. And hearing jingle bells on loop for a week, I think would yeah, that's too much.
I was walking down the street literally yesterday, and there was a full Santa suit guy walking, and random people were taking pictures. So I feel like it would just be a lot of extra effort, and so I'd pass on that one.
I mean, definitely be comfortable, right? Because Santa wears some comfy outfits,
Yeah.
even when he's back in the workshop, just his suspenders and a t-shirt, right? With his little pants. And so I don't know. That's a tough one though, just because I like to be a little more festive and wear a variety of different Christmas sweaters. So
You need to give that up.
I know I might go jingle bells on that one.
I like how Stephanie said it's essentially cozy pajamas. I am all for living in cozy pajamas for a month straight. Um, I love it. All right, we've got a good group going and we've got a lot of amazing content. So why don't we jump straight in? I am Lee. I'm going to be your host for today. For those who aren't familiar with me or Confetti, I'm the founder and CEO of Confetti, and I'm one of the world's experts in employee culture and event planning, especially virtual team building. We have over 10,000 companies that we've worked with from Google and Facebook in improving their company culture. And we're the easiest way to discover, plan, and book unforgettable virtual and hybrid employee experiences, everything from hosted games to shippable classes. For those that you know us, it's the only platform that truly takes care of the entire event planning process from end to end with a happiness policy. And every company that's hybrid or remote that I know of is just struggling with figuring out how to build culture in a distributed workplace where people aren't able to gather together in person. And that's what we would love to help y'all with. I'm going to have Rob do his intro first, and then we'll move on to Lauren.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Rob Catalano here, all the way from Toronto. It is cold here, so the pajama coziness seems appropriate right now, so I might change my answer. I'm the co-founder of WorkTango. We're a platform that helps companies listen to their employees through employee surveys and action and drive recognition through amplifying values and behaviors. This is 20 years of what I've been doing is building companies to help organizations be better. I'm passionate about it. I've not only been a CEO and a business leader and a people leader, but I had the unique ability of working with hundreds of companies around the globe on what they've been doing to build great culture, especially in these times. So my goal is to bring a wisdom of crowds approach and all the things I've seen and learned, and excited to chat with you all today.
And Rob, I forgot before Lauren goes, I would love it if you also shared something personal about yourself, hobbies, interests, maybe what you're doing for the holiday break.
Sure. My go-to is I used to play guitar in a metal band. I'm a big metalhead. Any metalheads, let me know. I don't usually get a lot of, of chats on that one. But and I'm going to Scotland for Scotch tasting this holiday. So I'm super excited. That'll warm me up.
Oh, that's fun. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Winans. I'm the CEO and principal HR consultant at Next Level Benefits. After, I don't know, maybe 18-ish years in the corporate HR space, I left that gig to start an HR consulting firm. Been doing it now for 5 years. We've grown leaps and bounds, but typically how we serve our clients is we provide HR expertise on a short-term basis to assist as interim talent, fractional support, or to execute special projects as an extension of your HR team. And okay, let's see. Same question as it relates to personal stuff. Let's see. Something, I'm huge on podcasts. I'm sure that's not unusual, but there's one podcast that I never miss, and it's Juicy Scoop. I am a juicy scooper. If there are any juicy scoopers on the meeting today,
What is it? What's a juicy scooper? What? Tell me.
If you don't know, you got to figure it out. You gotta go out there and check it out. So if you're a juicy scooper, put it in the comments. I would love to see. I'd love to connect with you afterwards, and we can talk juicy scoop. But that's my number one podcast, and something I never miss each week.
I love Rob saying searching juicy scoop. Well, I'm so excited to dive into the future of work and talking a little bit about trends and things to keep in mind as the world continues to evolve and as HR continues to evolve. But one really important thing that I would love to share with all the attendees here. You've got an amazing group of people here, me, Rob, Lauren, if I can give us all a little bit of a humble brag, but we are here for you to talk about culture, whether you work with us, whether you don't work with us, we want to connect. We want to hear your questions, so please stay engaged as you already are in the chat, and also feel free to use the Q&A button. Just we're monitoring everything. So just whether it's on this webinar or whether you're like, you know what, I got a question for you after this webinar, we'll be sharing our contact information and would love to connect. So we're going to start with the first question of the day, which is talking about adaptability in changing work models. So my first question is, with remote and hybrid work now the norm, how will work environments evolve to meet employees' needs over the next decade? And what lasting changes should HR leaders prepare for? And how can companies ensure inclusivity, engagement, and cohesion in a dispersed teams? I know that's a juicy, big question, but Rob, maybe you can be the first one to tackle it.
Sure. Yeah, it's juicy. I guess the first part of it I think of is evolving work environments employees need. So, I think if the pandemic and remote work, taught us anything, it's the fact that we can get things done despite, how long we thought it would take to move down that road. So I think focusing on flexibility is going to continue to be key just in terms of managing employee expectations. I also think the concept of the office or your remote sections as a hub is really what companies need to be focused on moving forward. And WorkTango is a really great example, right? We went completely remote. We have hubs in Chicago and Austin and Toronto and Ottawa and other places, but we have created a structure to allow people to get together in those places to at least have human-to-human interactions, build levels of connections with your teammates. So I think that concept of, especially with talent, available globally, bringing people together, I think is a huge way that we need to meet employees' needs. I think just in general, just technology enablement. Like some organizations do not have folks that have the knowledge and know-how on leveraging technology to connect with their employees, leverage new tech for meetings and webinars and those types of items. So depending on the industry and the makeup of the workplace, I think that's really critical. And lastly, I think it's just around wellness. So how do you make sure that we're thinking and focusing on the stresses that come with working in this remote type environment. Now at WorkTango, we actually shut down the office twice a year, right? A week in July and a week in December to allow people to recoup, re-energize, and come back, but also do things that are important to them, right? Spend time with their family or travel to Scotland or those type of things. But I think the last part of your question was around what should HR prepare for? And I think a lot, right? Like how do you build connection around remote work, right? Again, we can't connect with people day in and day out. How do we redefine performance management? How do we talk more about outcomes versus, presenteeism? I think the last thing is just around L&D. Like, how do we continue to evolve the learning and development process of all the technology needs, how technology is changing the workplace in general? So, yeah, a meaty question, I think, warranted a meaty answer. So happy to double click on anything, but just high
I love
level
that.
things come to mind.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great great answer. And Lauren will move things on to you. And then well, yeah.
So Rob took all my answers. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said, Rob. I think the one thing I would add, and something that I'm seeing more HR teams doing, is getting a better sense of their employee base's appetite for interaction and what the frequency of that looks like, right? There are some of us who are introverts, and it is totally cool not to, to only connect with our colleagues maybe in a social setting or have those social interactions maybe once a week, once every other week. And it doesn't necessarily drain us to not have that direct connection with everyone. But then there are others that thrive on that and that really need that in order to be productive and to feel like they're collaborating well and really a part of the culture of an organization. So, I think a lot of HR teams specifically are taking a deeper dive into that. There are many employees, particularly in, office settings, but also at a variety of different levels within an organization and different, geographical areas are, taking those personality type tests as, part of your onboarding process, or maybe, part of an annual event, just so that everyone's kind of on the same page about how to work with one another. And I think, from those results, you can really identify who might be at risk of really needing those more regular touch bases and more regular group sessions versus those who are going to probably be pretty okay and not necessarily need to be included on every single thing because they're more productive when they're heads down working on something. So I'm seeing a lot of HR teams customizing what that interaction looks like from person to person, from team to team. And I would expect to see more of that in the coming years.
That's really great points. I completely agree with what both of y'all have said, and also just the fact that what we're seeing from companies is that, you kind of can't win anymore in the sense that if you do have a remote workplace, like not actually everybody loves to work in a remote setting, or actually, they have different needs. So really understanding what the needs are of every single person, in the same way as people in companies that are fully in the office, what are their needs and how can we best support them if for some people, maybe let's say commuting is a challenge, or a childcare pickup, certain elements of that life, and just understanding what's the cadence that these people want to get together. I think another thing that kind of comes to mind for me is like corporate culture really used to be defined by these like in-office interactions, these physical gatherings. And now for at least remote companies, it's hinging on like the virtual experiences, the asynchronous communications, these like digital engagement platforms. And I was speaking to a CEO yesterday of a company that's trying to revolutionize emails through video. And, we forget that like so much context is like lost through just that communication. I'm sure we've all read a message and we're like, that was kind of like rude, or like it kind of comes off because we're filling in blanks that we don't actually even have. We're just creating like narratives and stories in our heads. And I think that it's really important for HR to really figure out how as we're saying goodbye to the modern day office and we're saying, hello to more unique in-person meetings and offsites, we need to figure out how to like cultivate that sense of belonging through very intentional, well-designed digital interaction. So that's my little ad. I'm going to move on to the next question, but I'm already seeing some amazing questions coming from people in the chat. So my thoughts is I'm going to try to leave a little bit of time at the end of today to either get to their answers, or what we'll do for anybody that drops a question, we are going to have Natalia, who's our webinar assistant here. She's going to write them all down. She's going to educate on them to us at the end of today. And if we don't get to them, we promise, me, Rob, and Lauren, we are going to hand respond to each person who writes us a question. So please keep them coming and know that your questions will be answered, even if we don't get to them on this webinar. But we'll make our best effort to make that happen.
Leah, I just want to jump in.
Please.
Sorry, it was a really good point about the introvert extrovert, and it was a really good question. And I don't want to get the name wrong, but around it's not just extrovert introvert, but generational appetite. And
yeah,
I think the biggest key is flexibility. Like at the end of the day, allowing people to choose their own adventure is important. But I found when you give people rules of engagement, which means, hey, these are the 2 or 3 things that are must-have. Maybe it's delivering corporate messaging in terms of what the goals are, or talking through performance. I think if you can define that, but that there's other things that you don't have to come to, like based on your own personal requirements. I find when you send those guardrails out, it's really great, whether it's generational or your appetite for introvert, extrovert. But it gets back to, I think, just giving people the option. The forcing part is what people don't respond well to. I found that just really helps. So just food for thought as that one question came in on the last answer.
totally. Lauren, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, no, he said it great.
I love it. Awesome. So next question that we have is around technology and human connection. So the big scary buzzword in the room is AI and automation, and the reshaping the traditional roles, the employee experience. So how can organizations leverage technology to foster rather than hinder human connection and organizational culture? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I can
I have
go
a lot,
first.
but go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few thoughts on that. I mean, I think I'll start with, there's a lot of trepidation around AI, as we know, for a variety of reasons. And I think, several that come to mind that are from a people perspective is, oh, if I subscribe too quickly to AI, what will that do to privacy? What will that do to the employee experience? What will that do to my job, to my role? How will it impact me personally? Will my job be replaced? Will it change into something I don't want it to? And I think that anytime there's something newly kind of introduced into the workplace, there's naturally a what's in it for me, or how's this going to impact me sort of thing. And, I really see, HR's role, particularly within, this whole conversation, is really trying to facilitate a conversation internally around how are we going to use AI and what ways are we going to use AI? Because a lot of organizations out there are usually, in most cases, starting to use AI on a forward-facing view directly with their clients and their customers. And that is usually where they're going to invest the dollars in the technology. And then it's going to take some time before it fully integrates internally. But I think those organizations that are maybe a little bit ahead of the curve and have created both external and internal uses for AI, I think what they're finding, at least through the studies that I've been looking at, is that it's not as moving as quickly as we all talk about it moving, because it takes time to build process, to build guardrails, to build policy around how things are going to be used and how employees are to interact with them. And so I say all this to say, I think that the main, concern around what AI is going to be, what it's going to do, how it's going to impact us, those are fears that, maybe we all can continue to be thinking about and have. But I think the reality is that it's not infiltrating our day-to-day as much as we think it might be. Meaning there's tools and resources out there. Let's use them. Let's experiment with them. Let's figure out, how we can incorporate them into our daily life and how we can improve culture and employee experience with them. But let's also remember that, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And so the risk is, I think, much less, and the concerns can maybe be tempered a bit while we all kind of dance around and figure out how to incorporate this into our daily lives.
I love that.
I don't know
Rob, what
if I
about
answered
you?
the question, but I'm hoping I at least scratched the surface and teed something up for Rob to maybe, add from his perspective, particularly with WorkTango. I'm sure you have a very unique perspective.
I think you
Yeah,
really reflected all of the kind of the questions and the anxieties and the concerns so well. So I love that. Yes, Rob, go ahead.
yeah, and to your point, we can spend 45 minutes just on this question. But the one thing that you said that really I think stands out is kind of with them, right? What's in it for me? And often we don't communicate to folks, or we do communicate, use these tools because they're going to help you, but help you do what? Like what's really in it for you? And I think from an HR lens or even any employee lens, like if you use these tools to automate routine tasks or streamline your processes, now you're freeing time to have meaningful conversations with people, right? Especially from an HR lens, right? And just the ability to get yourself more time back to have those types of discussions or do things that are, everyone says it, right? We want to do things more strategic and we want to do things that aren't into the mundane tasks. And even though we all have to do that, if we can minimize that, think about the impact AI can have in terms of, not hindering connection culture to the point of the question. There's a lot of, leaders on this call. I'll use an example of WorkTango, but we recently launched a concept of taking all the comments from employee surveys. So you can take hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and in one button, get a summary with AI. Well, what used to take 3 days to look through and read everything, theme them, now technology does that in a minute. So you can understand what are the sentiment of what people are thinking in the whole company or different buckets of the company. And more importantly, start digging into the whys and the whats and have those meaningful conversations. So I think that's really important. And then the last thing I'll say here in terms of, I lost the question. A lot of good chats here. How to foster rather than hinder human connection. But think about what AI can do for breaking down barriers, right? Think about if you have a multilingual organization, in one click, you can take a CEO address and make that in every single language, still with video to interact with people. There's so many ways that AI can actually bridge those gaps when it comes to communications. And again, whether it's virtual reality experiences or other things that you could be doing, it's just, I think companies should really be thinking about what's my 2025 strategy when it comes to leveraging technology to benefit the employees, the business, and our customers. And I think if you look at that lens, at least you can come up with a couple things to inch your way towards it. And Lauren, you said it, right? This isn't going to happen overnight. Like, let's play it, let's test. And I think that experience and confidence starts to build.
And I think that internal communication, like that transparency with your employees is incredibly helpful. If they understand that, hey, we're piloting things, we're trying things out, and we're looking for your feedback in return. And, how things are today are not going to be how they're going to be tomorrow. Like, these are things that are evolving. We're like literally in the eye of the storm, and we're like, we're building the plane as we're flying it, sort of thing. And, I think, the more that those words can be said out loud or put in print or shared with employees from leadership, from HR, I think it will help to calm some of the fears and allow them to be a little more open to the changes and to the experiences that are really, in most cases, going to help them be more productive and be more connected within the workforce and within the workspace. And so, yeah, it's sometimes I think we get in our own way, right? It's like, leaders and HR, we have an idea of how we want things to land, but we don't actively communicate while we're going through that process and bringing the employee along with us. We wait until we're at the conclusion to announce something. So I think if you kind of look at it from a different point of view and bring them along, I think you're going to get a lot more, bang for your buck.
I love that. I love what both of you said. And my little ad is very much piggybacking off of one of the concepts that both of you brought on, but Rob, really, like, hopefully I would say that AI actually does revolutionize a lot of the administrative tasks that HR is often burdened with, and that it really gives them the opportunity, instead of it seemingly be scary, but giving them this opportunity to do what HR in my eyes has always been meant to do, which is really connecting authentically with other employees. And like, I know so many HR leaders, they end up getting so bogged down with all the tasks that they don't have the bandwidth to connect with each employee on a one-to-one intimate basis, once a month, once a quarter, and to be able to really check in with them and guide them through situations that are sticky and tough, whether on a daily or weekly basis as they navigate through that. So like, how amazing that they actually get to know their teams and understand what's working for them, what isn't, and be a bridge for the organization to thrive, which is really where I think HR's future is heading to, which is very exciting in my opinion, and like take off all of that administrative tasks that take away all their, good intentions of wanting to help the organization.
And I can't help myself, so I need to add one thing. I'm so sorry. But like when you said connecting authentically, it's not just the conversation, but think about what like AI can do for personalization. Like think about it from an HR lens. We are thinking about taking feedback from a survey and implementing, or an L&D plan. Well, a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't really fit the bill, but when AI can personalize the recommended learnings and actions based on that person's world or environment or challenges that you've collected through the other data points, like that stuff happens today. It exists. And
Yeah.
companies just need to figure out a way, like authentic, connection and communication. Personalization is a big way we can start leveraging new technologies, which is going to go a long way, and also freeing up time for those people as well to kind of look through the mass of information that HR or the organization is sending them.
I'll also add, and then we will move on, is because really I feel like the whole world debate. Maybe actually we've been inspired. Maybe we should take this as a cue to do a webinar just on HR AI kind of world. But I know that one of the hardest things, both for employees and employers, is when relationships and positions don't work out. And I say this empathetically to both sides of the equation, because I just find hiring so flawed, where, you're going to spend days, months, years with somebody, but you have 1, 2, 3 hours to interview them and create, this, they have to create this impression, and it's not a complete data set. You have a resume, but you can't really get to know somebody fully within 2, 3 hours of being in front of them. And I think one ways that we can lean on AI in the HR space that we haven't really talked too much about is really transforming recruiting, and giving, maybe there's different AI driven algorithms that will help recruiters identify the best candidates based on more holistic set of data that we aren't able to kind of get our hands around, not only qualifications, but things that deal with company culture and emotional intelligence, long-term potential within the organization. So it's things that I know are also very debatable, but also something potentially to look forward to. So moving on to our third question here, we've got employee expectations and values as a theme. So how can employers best position themselves to retain and attract talent with a normalization of job hopping amongst Gen Z and millennials? That's the stereotypical kind of category. What are kind of your thoughts on that front? And maybe I'll just kick things on my side if I can. But to me, I feel like one of the and kind of piggybacking off of speaking of recruiting, and I've said this and I always will continue to say this, but to me, loyalty is one of the most underrated and underpaid attributes on a resume, and it deserves premium. Historically, I feel like companies really undervalued long-term employees, just being like, oh, they're just a team player, they can stick with us. But I think offering essentially smaller raises while overpaying to attract new hires is not the right solution to be able to kind of connect that loyalty back to the organization. And this imbalance really leads to this talent gaps, this, resentment around the workforce. So I'm very curious what your thoughts are on this question. And Lauren, maybe you go first, if just trying to change things up and
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of things at play here, right? You've got this job hopping that is going to continue. And so, to kind of kick things off here, I always, I would recommend just, we have to accept the fate, right? We have to accept where we're at. We are not in an era where employees are staying for 40 or 50 years at the same workplace. It's just not, that's just not the environment that we have these days. So I think number one, there's a level of acceptance that has to occur here. And then, number two, I think just kind of, better understanding the nuances between generations, I think is incredibly important. I think a lot of us think we know the nuances, but, really kind of looking at the research and the case studies that are out there is really helpful. And then also, not being afraid to regularly survey employees, whether it be through, one larger annual survey, whether it be through pulse surveys, whether it be through, feedback loops, whether it be through focus groups. There's so many different ways to work with your employee population to understand what's important to them so that you can really prioritize how to spend your time and how to build strategy around the things that matter. And so, all of that to say, I don't know if we will be able to decrease the frequency with which, many people job hop from company to company. But I do think that we can all feel good about what we offer as HR practitioners if we really spend the time to build a strategy that really does align with the people who are currently working in the workplace. If people still choose to self-select out and to move on to other places, that's completely, their prerogative. There are a lot of reasons why people may move on, and might have nothing to do with your culture. It might have a variety of other things to do with things that they can't change, or maybe they feel they can't change. So while loyalty, I think, is absolutely an attribute that should be rewarded, I do think that there are just natural circumstances in the stage that we are in our world today that are going to prevent that from being something that we can rely on, that person who's going to be there year after year. So all this to say, I'm not defeated in my thought process here, but I'm also definitely on the side of acceptance and thinking more about how can we make sure we're doing what's right for our employees. If you haven't asked them, then you definitely won't know, and you definitely won't be able to do what's right by them. And so I definitely think that we need to take a little bit more of a practical approach, and then start to cater our HR strategy around that, around compensation, around benefits, around career development, around coaching, around leadership development, to ensure leaders are coaching their teams effectively and being great leaders, because a lot of people who leave their organizations are leaving their leader, not necessarily their culture. So there's lots of different things, I think, that kind of are tentacles that kind of come off of this. But ultimately, I think we have to ultimately accept kind of what our fate is, but be able to pivot quickly and be agile accordingly.
I have like three thoughts that I'm trying to think of in my head and translate into digestible formats. And it's based on what Lee said, Lauren said, and what the question asked. But the first thing that Lee said around, just paying people more over time, like, it's a sugar rush. Like, maybe it's embarrassing to bring up Maslow in a, at this day and age, but people don't stay for the base needs. They stay for culture, connection, self-actualization. So I've seen it time and time again. You pay people, they stay a little longer, but you're really not meeting their key needs. And to your point about, Lauren, about listening to employees, like, we built a company based on that. And even a question in the chat of like, what would be in the survey? But the idea is like understanding employee sentiment is really critical, whether that's, and you can use that data to identify, well, what drives engagement? Is there anything that correlates to the retention of your organization? There's a lot of data sets to be able to start thinking about what actually factors higher and what you should actually focus your efforts on, and not at a company level. Maybe it's by team or department or type of employee, or even like the comment earlier, even by generation. What are the things that drive them? So that's why that one size fits all doesn't work. But I think holistically, I think the mindset of how to retain and attract and keep these Gen Z job hoppers, or sorry, not Gen Z, Gen Z and millennial job hoppers, is rethink the strategy. Like, many companies approach listening or recognizing years of service or performance management or learning development on an annual basis because that's what we used to do. But employees at that generation, they don't work in years. They work in days and months and weeks. And thinking about how do we listen more frequently? How do we recognize more frequently? How do we have learning development for their career growth more frequently? Like, that's a different mindset that companies need to start thinking about, because people aren't going to wait around, right, for that 364 day later to talk about how did you do in terms of your goals that you set out there? So I think I want to kind of respond to a couple of the comments, but I think answering your question more specifically, just in terms of how we keep them, flexibility is key. That's what they care about. Second, focus on growth. Like does that career look like? And even if it's not career growth, what's the learning that can help them be qualified for their next job? And lastly, this has nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with AI, but build a purpose-driven organization. When we started WorkTango, I said we don't have a mission statement because missions end. We have a passion statement, and that was to improve work lives. And work is in parentheses because we spend a lot of our waking time at work. When you have someone that comes to WorkTango, loves their experience, every day they're doing something they're passionate about helping organizations build better workplaces, which drives the better culture and better business results, it's really hard for them to step up and take that passion somewhere else, right? Your base of competition goes lower and lower. So really leaning in on your culture, your values, your purpose and passion, I think are critical ways to keep these job hoppers. And last thing I'll say, it's not even job hoppers. Like I'm hearing recent events of people having just 2 jobs. Like they're literally working at 2 jobs at the same time because it's remote. So yeah, there's some work to be done to get people's attention.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify my stance in case it was misunderstood, was just that what I've seen sometimes from other employers was, and I don't think that this was intentional, and I don't think that this also is very demonstrative of today's world where still finding a job is a little bit more time consuming. But in the height of 2021, when everything was really, positive and the sentiment was really great, what I found is that the companies were often spending more money on new hires and willing to attract those new hires rather than retention. I think that mindset is something that companies need to shift, because we know that loyalty becomes a key competitive advantage. We know that loyalty encompasses deep company knowledge and a strong commitment to the business. And I just feel like employers who recognize and reward loyalty rather than penalize it, which is what I saw as trends from the past, being like, oh, they're loyal, they're not going to leave, so I don't need to, I can actually take that budget and give it to the new hire, is just something that should change. But yeah, that's just wanted to clarify. We're going to move on. We're going to move on to the future of employee well-being, which is another really hot topic. So as mental health and well-being has become more of a priority, what innovative practices or policies do you foresee emerging over the next year, over the next decade, to support employee wellness? Do any of you want to go first? Rob, we're gonna go with you.
Sure. Really quickly, I think what's going to be emerging in the next little while is technology is going to help us be proactive in support. We'll be able to start predicting, issues or burnout or wellness before it becomes a real problem. Think about all the technology we have with, your wearables and ways we can collect that type of data. So I think being proactive in terms of wellness is going to be a huge shift of focus. And then I think it's going to focus more on holistic wellness. So not just, physical and mental wellness, but what about financial wellness or all the other elements of, there's some organizations talk about 8 different dimensions of wellness. I think looking at it holistically and having that data to make it a little easier will be where things are focused. So I'll pause on this one. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think that the definition of wellness and well-being is going to evolve. I think it's going to broaden. And I think that, a lot of us, if you think about, just walking so many steps a day or having a wearable on or participating in a, wellness event at work, these are all great, ways to incorporate wellness into our daily lives. But wellness is also, having the skills and the tools to be able to balance your day, to be able to be good with time management, to be able to move from, one topic to another or project to another within your day. So there's some soft skills here that are going to need to be incorporated into the learning and development programs at a variety of different places. I also think that, when we think about mental health, a lot of us reach burnout, right? Well, why do we reach burnout? Because workload management is not a priority within the workplace that we work in, and so, things are getting pushed downhill and too many competing priorities are getting in the way of us being productive on maybe the really critical priorities. There's, often sometimes a lack of leadership accountability and just leadership in general that kind of helps lead a team to focus on what matters and to block out what doesn't. And so, burnout ends up being a word that we throw around a lot, and we know that burnout affects mental health, but asking someone to wear the wearable or walk the 10,000 steps a day is not going to help them, right? But what can help them is having a either an HR team or an executive leadership team that truly understands, okay, how can I impact an employee's well-being here in the workplace? Not just what I can offer them through programs and insurance plans, which are critically important, don't get me wrong. It should be something that you're continuing to put emphasis and value on, but it's also taking a look at, how are we structured? Are we structured appropriately? Do we have enough people doing this particular job, or are we killing the people that are here and preventing them from being their best selves and making them ultimately not want to stay here? So I think, the expanding the definition of mental health, wellness, well-being, what contributes to that, and what workplaces can do to really help mitigate some of those things beyond just what's in a benefits program, I think is going to be incredibly critical over the next 3 to 5 years.
Totally. I love it. I'm going to add a few more things and we're going to move on to the next question. But it's interesting because I think that the last few years, and hopefully everybody that's on this call has just been exponentially growing and succeeding and thriving. But have heard in the sentiment, and even us as a company, like we've had our challenges significantly over the last few years. And I think so many companies have not figured out how to prioritize people over profits, because at the end of the day, we're all businesses and we need that profits in order to stay alive as organizations. We need to continue to succeed as businesses. Otherwise, nobody will have a job. And I know that these are very scary, big concepts, but in the stress of constantly feeling the need to produce in order to succeed, the team ends up running thin, and that's where the concept of burnout ends up coming through. And I think that the struggle is something that both companies and employees are having, and I can definitely empathize with both sides. And just a takeaway, but I've experienced this recently, and I'm like, I'm not getting my steps in. Like, I'm a new mom. I'm back-to-back meetings, 9 to 6 p.m. Then I have to take care of the baby, and then I come back online. Like, it's just it seems like an impossible thing. So a small tip, but it is something that I encourage: take your best friend, that's part of your workflow in your life. Share with them that you're not, if you feel comfortable that you're not getting your steps in. And what me and my co-founder have done lately is we alternate from our one-on-ones, and we both know we're not getting our steps in, and we're both like, okay, one time I'm going to go on a 1 hour walk. One time you're going to go on a 1 hour walk. We alternate. And, during the times that he's on a walk, I'll take notes, and then vice versa. And I think just being vulnerable with the people that you have, and also being vulnerable with your manager and saying like, hey, the workload that I have is a little more than what I can have. Let's either reprioritize together. Let's realign expectations of what can and cannot be done. I think people are just sometimes afraid to have these conversations, but most people and most managers, they care about your well-being. And I think it's really encouraging your teams and different levels to have those hard conversations. So that's my little perspective here. I just want to say we're going to continue still with the few questions that we have left, but I'm just blown away by the amazing questions that are coming through the chat. And knowing that we're a little bit tight on time, I wrote this in the chat, but what we're going to do is we're going to compile these questions. Rob, Lauren, and I are going to come up with comprehensive answers. And some of these questions are private. For any private questions, we will anonymize or we will generalize them, but we will get to answer all of your questions at least after the webinar in a follow-up. So that will give you something to look forward to in case we're not able to cover it all today. Moving on to our next question, we've got skills for the future of work. So with the rapid pace of change, How can HR leaders cultivate a culture of continuous learning and upskilling that keeps them agile? So what skills will be the most crucial for the workforce of the future? Do you have any opinions on that, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think the skills that are important, I think we kind of talked about is all the digital fluency and but also the soft skills that are really critical to navigate through it. I think the first part of the question around how do we cultivate a culture of continuous learning? One is invest in it. Like, did I really want to spend a ton of money on giving everyone in the company access to AI tools? Not great from the line, but great in terms of them being able to learn. So I think investing is gonna be important. Also encourage curiosity. Like, we actually incentivize people if they take their own L&D practices and learn, something that we deem as important, or they deem as important, whether that's their personal growth or kind of holistic skills. Again, we reward those and incentivize those types of activities as an example. And lastly, just support experimentation. Like, no one tells a story about how Google gave everyone 10% of their time to do whatever the hell they want, and then they created great products. Like, give the time and space for people to be actual to learn and test and try. Like, you don't really learn until you act and do it. So I find if you can carve out time for that and make space, really important.
I think too, like, really kind of flipping L&D on its head a little bit in terms of, is the way that we're doing it today working within our organization? If the answer is yes, fantastic. Continue your current model and your current structure, but find ways to ensure that, upskilling and continuous learning is part of, is feasible within the structure that you have. If you ask yourself that question and what you find is, hey, how we're delivering training and coaching opportunity and mentoring opportunity and career development opportunity, how we're doing that today is not working that great. It's a great time to say, you know what? Let's flip this thing on its head and think about things in a different way. When I say that, I'm thinking, back to our AI conversation, you can definitely leverage AI to kind of, help, identify the different areas within your program that you want to dive deeper into. There's also ways to create a learning program that is less lecture-y, but a lot more like this, like open dialogue, where you can learn from your peers and your colleagues. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach L&D, and I think that upskilling is going to be incredibly important over the next few years here. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to have to mold and shape their jobs because the administrative tasks are gone. And while we see the upside of that and the benefit of that, there's going to be some downside to that as well. And that's going to be there might be folks within the organization who aren't ready for that transition and that change. And so in order to help bring them along, it's important to identify what those challenges might be now and start offering programs and assistance to get folks to be less reliant on the way things are and start thinking and visualizing the way things are going to be.
I love that. My little ad is I really think the next decade is really going to shift away from a bit more of that degree-based hiring and more into that skills-based hiring. And I think organizations are going to just increasingly prioritize these like practical skills, this problem-solving abilities, adaptability is like a very, I think, key characteristic that is important over these like traditional educational credentials. And I think as employees just are going to need to become more agile and more adaptable. In the past, I don't know, 5 years, ever since COVID, I feel like we've just had to be very flexible and just learning on our own when encountering problems. And I also see a rise in like online learning platforms. Any kind of online certifications are just going to be able to help play just a pivotal role in upskilling employees, allowing individuals to pivot careers, which is something that we alluded to a little bit earlier regarding like the opposite kind of sides of loyalty and what it would mean like to support your employees and pivoting careers if that's what interests them, but deepening their expertise in different niche areas without really creating this like return to formal education is part of my little thing that I want to share. All right, moving on. We've got leadership and trust in. Oh, Lauren, did you want to say something? I couldn't tell if I missed it.
Oh, no, I'm ready.
Okay. All right, leadership and trust and decentralized teams. Oh my gosh. When I speak to HR teams, I feel like this whole element of connectivity and trust and how are we going to build that when people don't get to see each other and people are constantly texting with one another and everybody is misunderstanding what everybody's saying. So how do you see the role of leadership evolving in this decentralized and remote team workforces, and what are going to be some essential qualities and practices for building trust and accountability in a more flexible future?
That's
I
a
know
loaded question. I don't know. I love
There's a lot there.
it's
Go ahead, Rob.
do
You go first.
I mean, you know, leading remote teams, it's a shift in mindset. We've said some of it already, right? Like focusing on outcomes, right? Like trust your team to achieve the goals, not, not worrying about whether they're at their desk or not. Very clear communication, right? If we're not really clear of what success looks like, then it's really hard for
yeah
people to get there. But again, if we don't check in early and often, like that kind of annual performance process is talking about, it's really hard to course correct and get people on the same time. And I think when you do those two things, it builds trust, and that's going to be important. But I think maybe the one major struggle I've seen organizations lean on is how to build and cultivate that connection, right? We talked earlier about getting people together, and but like how else can you do it? And whether those are ways to recognize achievements and pull people together for those types of activities. We still do daily meetings at some of the department levels and weekly meetings for the whole organization to really cultivate that connection. It's not just about readouts on what's happening in the company. It's like, we heard from you. Here's what we've heard, or ask questions to the leadership team. So I think those are just different ways on how what I think key your companies can do. And to the other part of the question around qualities, a lot of what we talked about, the soft and hard skills that are really important to get us there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as things kind of move into more of like a skill-based environment, I think a lot of us, are going to have to kind of mold and shift our mindsets too, right? Like, so for many years it was, I'm in this role and I'm, seen as, I've got a subject matter expertise. I'm going to bring that to work every day. I don't want to show anyone that I have questions, and sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. I think a lot of us need to kind of get over that and focus more on what can I bring to the table? What can I bring to this organization? And when I feel like there might be someone else within the team who can provide more value than I can, not being afraid to kind of have that dialogue with your leader. And I think, leaders are going to naturally then start to be able to manage these decentralized teams in a lot more of an easier way. And the reason I say that is because if you are very clear, not only accountable for your team, but clear on what their strengths and their potential weaknesses are, I think you're able to kind of help them to create, resources and opportunities to supplement, where there might be some skill gaps or, perhaps just naturally some challenges. I mean, everyone's really great at things. Everyone's not so great at other things. I think that what happens is a lot of times is there's this desire to not want to admit that we don't know something. And then that leads us to covering things up. And then that leads to distrust. And then, your leader is like, this person can't work remote. They're not even doing their job. Meanwhile, it's not about remote. It comes down to whether or not, you have the particular skill or skill set that's necessary for the work that you're being tasked with. So, I think, when we think about upskilling, we think about AI, we're in a really pivotal moment right now to really kind of revamp what workforce looks like, what workforce planning looks like. When I think about the things that we contribute here, whether it be Confetti or WorkTango or Next Level Benefits, what we're trying to do is ultimately bring together, and solve for issues and or gaps in either the marketplace or within an HR team. And so we can add value in a variety of ways without you having to tap your internal folks within the HR team to suddenly become an expert in one of these particular areas. So I think there's a lot of ways that leaders can be more open and transparent with their teams. But I think us as employees, all of us, not to be afraid to make a mistake, and not to be afraid to ask for help, and not to be afraid to be real about what we can bring to the table and maybe what someone else might be able to bring that's of more value. I think once we get to that place and we're able to be a little more open, I think naturally some of these things like, upskilling, career development, having more trust across a remote workforce is going to just kind of naturally be the results and the outcomes. But it's hard because not all of us have time during the day to step back and zoom out and look at everything as it really is today. I think that's what's great about having time together right now is we can kind of throw these ideas out there and start getting you thinking about what your 2025 could look like and what you can bring to your leader and how you can, maybe find ways to foster trust in different ways.
Totally. I think my ad as we conclude this webinar is really that, culture from what I've seen, and especially in a remote first world, but it doesn't always form organically. It needs to be intentionally cultivated, and leaders play a critical role in shaping these different rituals and celebrating the achievements and making people feel recognized and ensuring inclusivity to create a sense of belonging. And as we're concluding this year, I decided to speak to a lot of our customers and kind of understand what isn't working well. And one of the things that we've just found is that most HR teams, they don't really have a plan or process or program or anything really to help the teams like understand like what they should be doing. Like most companies that I know of don't, if there's a budget, like the managers don't even know that there's a budget to put together team building events. They don't have a process on how to get these vendors approved. Like all these things aren't there. And what happens with like planning these culture initiatives ad hoc, what we find is it just doesn't really work. And that we're leaving this extremely important need to have element about a business succeeding up to chance. And I find that working on culture is kind of like going to the gym. Like you need a plan, you need a schedule, you need a process. Otherwise, it ends up getting under prioritized. It ends up getting overlooked. And where there is no accountability, there just isn't any follow through. So I think that's a big trend that we're seeing right now is a lot more intentionality, creating a plan, creating a schedule, creating a process. In order to not just take this well-intentioned thing, but actually turning it into a system that's scalable and equitable so every team can try to achieve a great culture. Y'all, we went over time. I didn't even realize we were having so much fun with y'all together. We didn't even realize that we were over time. I was just like, oh yeah, it's 12:56. That's 4 minutes before 1. And I'm in Eastern time, so apologies if my time wasn't aligning with yours. There were so many great questions. We didn't even finish all of the questions on our side, but I hope today was helpful and inspiring going into the next year. And we love building connections, again, with people who are our customers, but aren't our customers. Utilize us and Rob and Lauren. Before we conclude, Rob, can you drop your best way to connect? I think I saw a LinkedIn message, but Lauren, if you want to connect as well. And I'm going to leave my email here in the chat. If you have absolutely any questions, please write to us, whether it's now, a month from now, a year from now. We are friendly folks. And as discussed, Rob, Lauren, and I, we're going to create a little Google Doc. We're going to dump all these questions that y'all have graciously submitted. And we are going to follow up with you both individually and in a mass email by sharing all of our answers in there as a helpful resource coming out of this webinar. Have a wonderful holiday season. Listen to Jingle Bells for a week straight, put on that Santa Claus costume, drink hot chocolate, don't drink hot chocolate, but have a wonderful rest of the year. Rob, Lauren, thank you so much for all of your amazing insights, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Take
Yeah,
care.
take care, everyone.
Bye for now.